Hello and welcome to this video where we're going to take a look at the new features of Halion Sonic SE. So Halion Sonic SE has seen an upgrade to version 3 along with Cubase 9.5, and as a result of that it has something which is much more interesting than it used to be, certainly. So if you're anything like me, it wasn't your go-to instrument unless you just needed something which would just provide fairly generic sounds. I used it quite a bit in instructional videos because everybody has it. It's installed with most versions of Cubase, but it now has something much more interesting. So initially you can see it's had a bit of a visual update. It looks a little more modern, but most importantly now when you go to the Load tab under all instrument sets, you can see we can now pick Flux. So we've got various different sound sets, and Flux is the one we're interested in, which is the Wavetable Synth element which is now included in it. So Halion Sonic is moving more towards being a synth engine rather than merely a single kind of synth. So once you select Flux, we can see we get the sounds which are available. There's 124 in total default presets, and you can select them as ever by characters, etc., with the different filters we can apply. So we've got things such as be free, etc., kickshaws, and so on. So we're going to look at these in a little more detail, and importantly get to know some of the real features of the Flux engine, because I think it's really important that you aren't just somebody who just loads up presets and doesn't really know what to do with them. Presets are really important because obviously the sound designers who've made them have spent a long time exploring all the possibilities of these sounds and giving you a decent range of sounds to start off with, but it's not often that they fit perfectly with everything. So you may need to understand what the controls do. So we have these macro controls at the bottom which allow you to alter the most important parts of each sound. So for instance, if we load up B3, you'll see they'll change, and we've got filter cutoff settings, etc., and ring mod and resonator and reverb. But that's just the executive summary. What we want to do is get a little more into the details, and that's what we're going to be looking at today. So if you want to follow along, load up B3 and we're going to take it from there. So that's the arpeggiated sound that we've got there. We're going to turn some of these off. So we're going to turn off the reverb, turn down the resonator mix, turn down the ring modulator frequency, and also filter distortion, just to be going on with. Now, we now have a full edit page. So we can see here the overview of the facilities that it's got. So we've got two oscillators, we've got a sub oscillator and also a noise oscillator. We've got a modulation matrix, which is hugely important, which we're going to be looking at in a bit of depth. Voices, and the arpeggiator. So first thing first, I'm just going to turn the arpeggiator off. So now we just get the basic sound. On this oscillator page which we're on, I'm going to turn the filter off for the time being. Everybody goes deaf. And then I'm going to turn off the noise oscillator and oscillator 2. So we're just going to look at this briefly. Okay, let's turn down the EQ boost. And now this is the sound itself. So we have a selection of wavetables that we can go through. So if we set it, for instance, onto additive 01, I can just play that. There's a wide range of waveforms for you to play around with. So there's hundreds of them under here. So let's just look at some of the others. So we've got sine sweep, etc. So there's loads that we can just play around with, just playing around with those sounds. One of the reasons why this kind of synth is really useful for working with filters is because there are so many harmonics present. So if we just play a note here, you can see there's a huge range of harmonics. So we're going from 50 Hertz all the way up to 5K and plenty of other stuff which is below -24, so off the analyzer there, but still present in the signal. And that means when you do start using the filter, you've got lots to work with. If it was just a sine wave, we'd just have one fundamental and not really a lot to work with. So that's why these are so useful. So I'm just going to close that down to save a bit of distraction there. Now, the filter section, we can see is a fairly typical filter in some respects. So we've got a ADSR to control the filter behavior, etc., as you can hear there. Loads of filter types, much like the sampler tracks engine, so I'd imagine they share a fair bit of their code. We've got resonance, as you'd expect, distortion, but also distortion types. So we've got tube, hard clip, and bit reduction, which are fairly hard. And we've also got the rate reduction, which provides us with something a little more subtle, or in that case, sounding a little more like sample misclocking. But there's some nice sonic possibilities in there already. And obviously envelope control, how much velocity controls the filter. So at the moment it's not doing it whether I hit it hard or soft, but if we turn that up, so when I'm hitting it gently, it's not really opening up, and I hit it hard, it does. Key follow as well, which is really crucial for making your filter sounds consistent across different notes and octaves, so that's something you may want to play around with. So the filter is fairly useful and functional. I'm just going to turn it off for a second. We can turn off Oscillator 1. Oscillator 2 has another selection of wavetables to play around with. And again, with the mix of the two and the filter, let's turn the level up of that. So again, something sounding a little like a subtractive synth. There's a whole load of sounds to play around with in here. Lots of things you can do. Sounds very much like the 80s to me. So there's our main two oscillators. We've also got a sub oscillator, so we can just click on that page. Fairly typically, sub oscillators may not be the most exciting of things, but they are really useful for adding some beef to a sound. But the noise oscillator, I think, is particularly interesting here. So we're just going to listen to that on its own. At the moment, it's set to power adapter 13, and we look through all the different wavetables, the samples that it has here. We've got some really useful things in here. So there are some drum sounds. So, for instance, kick. Now, at the moment, that has got loop turned on. So we're just going to turn loop off, and we just hear it once. So there's a kick sound. We've got some snare sounds, etc., and even toms. Now, this is something I've done quite often when I've been programming a synth sound. You can use the logical editor to take all of the pitches in whatever you're playing down to a given pitch, and then play that on a drum sound or on a white noise sample, etc., just to give it some extra attack or complexity. And this has all that built in, so you can have those playing. There's a whole load of various interesting sounds which I'm assuming have been recorded from this, that and the other, including Ethernet hub, etc. There's loads of different sounds to play around with. So for sort of sound design, unusual sound textures, this looks like it'll be a great place to start and spend some time. Now let's just get back to a fairly standard part of the synth and look at the Arpeggiator. So we're going to do this slightly out of order for reasons that become apparent in a minute. So the Arpeggiator, if we turn that on, we can see we've got a pretty well featured Arpeggiator. Let's just take a bit of that tone out of that, putting the filter on. Right, so that's listenable, at least for the moment. So here we have a competent arpeggiator. So nicely programmable. You can set the loop length just by changing that. So for instance, there we go. We can alter that really quickly, pick whichever length you want. We can turn steps on and off really easily by just turning them on like that. You can pick whether a step is legato into the next one as well. So really quick and easy to play around with this. These are the velocities of the notes that are getting played. You've got the pitch of the notes, so you can see here's the semitone displacement from the original note in here. It's a really useful, straightforward but useful arpeggiator to play around with. We've got a whole load of phrases built in, as you would expect. So contemp, arp, etc., control arp, dance arp. Let's try dance arp 01. So you can see those minus 24s are basically playing a bass drum note by shifting it down so much. And you're getting the rhythm in there, etc. There's loads. Just going through the presets would be interesting. And obviously in combination with different sounds, they're going to be different. There are many features to play around with in here. Highlights of them, particularly swing. So as you will have seen on another video on swing, swing is a really useful part of making any sequence section sound human and swinging, groovy, etc. And just being able to add it in here rather than needing to burn something down to MIDI and then alter it is really useful. So this is a great feature right here. Just adds a bit of I hesitate to say humanity, but humanity to it. Now the arpeggiator doesn't just output notes and velocities, it's got 3 other controllers. So it can output 3 other controllers, and these are going to come into play in this next section. So the modulation matrix. So this is probably where this is its most powerful. Now I'm going to just reset these. So this is the defaults that you would get with the sound that we loaded up, B3, but I'm just going to turn these off and then we're going to go through them. So the modulation matrix is what makes samplers like Short Circuit powerful. It's what makes Massive powerful. But I think the way that it's presented here, with it being in a single page with columns that you can easily understand what's going on, is one of the reasons why I find this much more useful than the way that it's presented in Massive. Because while Massive's modulation is immense, it's quite difficult to get your head around, particularly when you're first starting out and you're not entirely sure what's going on. So we're going to look at this here. So this is very reminiscent of Short Circuit, but it's actually a little more powerful in some ways. So effectively what you have is a source. So that's the place that your signal comes from. So in this case, we're going to change it to modulation wheel. So I'm going to be using the mod wheel on my keyboard to do the controlling here. And you have a destination. So over here is the destination. So here we are going to first put it to pitch, because that's the thing that's easiest to hear. And I know that's duplicating what a pitch bend wheel does, but this is just to get you an idea of how this works. So top of the shot, pitch there. And then I'm going to set it to 12 for 12 semitones. And now if I play a note and turn the arpeggiator off, excuse me, so you can probably hear what happened there. If I turn up the sustain level on the filter, but I'm going to just bring that up even more. I'm mindful of making anyone deaf by putting too much sonic abuse. So there we've routed the modulation wheel to pitch 12 semitones when it's at maximum. So just by moving the modulation wheel up, as you can see on the controller here, that's changing pitch. We could send it somewhere else, so let's send it to filter cutoff instead. So there you can hear the change in sound, etc. And that's where you can create complicated sounds. So we could make that modified. So this column here, the modified section here, this is where the strength of this really comes into play. And the way we can do that is by picking where we want it to go. So we click on Modifier and we see a menu of different things that can modify the signal. So we're going to pick LFO-A. So this is a low frequency oscillator. We're going to look at its settings in a second, but now this will be altering that signal before it gets to cut off. So if we go to LFO here, all I'm going to do is sync this, and it's set to sync to quarter notes. So now, well, when I start off, there's nothing happening with it. When I move it up, you can hear that rhythmic changing, so it's synced to Cubase's tempo and playing like that. If we put it on pulse, it will be more pronounced because it's effectively on and off. And you can see the moment it's in bipolar mode. So what that means is it can move it down as well as up. If we put it into standard mode, you'll hear the lows aren't as low as when they're in bipolar mode, because bipolar mode means it can have a negative effect. So you get the idea with that. Let's pop that back onto sine wave for the moment. Now, if we wanted that to affect multiple things, we could set up the same information again, so mod wheel, LFOA, depth, and then a different destination. Or what we can do, if we're going to do it for more than two, we can use a thing called buses. So if we scroll all the way down in the destination window here, we can see we have buses, and all buses are a way of routing signals around a synth. So we're going to send that to bus 1, and now when I move the mod wheel, you'll hear nothing happens. You can see that changing on screen. But now we can use bus 1 as our source. So we'll turn it on, we'll pick bus 1, and now we're going to send bus 1 to cut off like we did before, and let's make that 100. So that's doing that. And let's say we wanted it to go to pitch as well. We can pick bus 1, no modifier at the moment, and send that to pitch. And now we're going to get a combination of the two things we had before. 60 is probably excessive because that's 5 octaves, but let's make it just the 1. Maybe that's not what we're after. Maybe we want to send it to resonance instead. So you can hear that when that peaks, the resonance is getting higher. If we take that up some more. Probably need a bit more. And we get a more aggressive sound. So the modulation section allows us to control all these different elements from either real-time controllers or from internal elements of the synth. So if we look at some of the sources, we've got all these different areas, and importantly the Arp Controller. So what we can do is we can make the Arpeggiator control how the notes sound is going to change by using the controller here, and we've got up to 3 of them, so we can do different things. But let's just do something progressive, which is just going to turn up the cutoff frequency as we go. So we'll turn on line 4 to keep it all nice and close together. We'll say Arp Controller 1. No modifier, but that is going to alter cutoff as well. And let's make that 100. And now, back in the Arp page, we're going to turn the Arpeggiator on, and then Controller 1, let's just make that progressively rise up, and we'll turn all these steps on. And now when we play, So we can hear the cutoff changing as we go. I say a fairly simple example, but you can use this to control multiple things, bearing in mind you've got 3 separate lanes, so they can control different elements of the sound. There's really a great deal that you can do in this synth. To go through all the features on all the pages would take hours, but I'd really strongly recommend that you spend some time playing around with them. So either loading up presets and then turning things on and off and modifying them to see what's going on, or just starting effectively from scratch and seeing what you can do. But say with such a wide range of presets that are in there, there's the 124 presets that are given, there's lots of things you can learn by effectively copying what the sound designers have done in this and seeing what you can get up to. But there's loads of sounds in here that you can use, particularly with the addition of the interesting noise oscillator in here. There's lots of sort of alternative sound design possibilities in here, and it's included with Cubase now. So while on the face of it, I mean, particularly Halion Sonic in the past hasn't been my go-to synth for almost anything, now with this, there's a lot of times when I think that'll probably be the second or third thing that I give a try. And for some things, it'll be the first thing that I give a try, because the noise oscillator in particular is so flexible. So hopefully you found this slightly more in-depth look at Halion Sonic SE3 informative, and thank you for watching.